Hey, everybody, welcome back to the 2020 recap episode of the Can We Please Talk podcast. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And I'm Nick Saveri.
This is our recap show, the end of 2020. Nick, it's been a fun year on the show. A lot to talk about, the different guests that we've had, the topics we've discussed. And also, we're all living through a pandemic, working from home. 2020 for me has been so crazy, just leaving New York City in mid-March during the pandemic and then kind of relocating to Florida around family. How's 2020 been for you, Nick?
Yeah, it's been a year, as a colleague of mine said recently. In this year, we've welcomed our newest member of our family, my daughter Eliza, who's now soon to be 10 months. My wife changed jobs, so that's brought us to Easton, Pennsylvania, where I now record from. I made some changes at work, changed my role in the company just to be more present at home. It's been a lot. It's been a lot of ups and downs, and it's a story of resiliency. I think a lot about just how my family, much like yours, just making the best of what's going on and staying focused and moving forward. My wife just got the vaccine as a physician the other day, so again, just more signs of where things are going. But yeah, as we end the year, I end in gratitude at just where we are and being healthy, and looking forward ahead. But it has definitely been a year, to say the least.
It's been so crazy, all the lives that have been lost over COVID-19. It's definitely been a tough year. I know personal friends that have lost loved ones, moms, grandparents. I definitely feel for those people and the people that are hurting with, everything that's going on economically, businesses being shut down. It's been such a tough year. And like you said, gratitude because, you and I were able to come together and kind of create this show. But then, it's evolved, and seeing something that we do as a passion project really kind of take off has been really cool to see. And some of the guests that we've had on, that's the purpose of today's show, is really to talk about, not only the topics that we touched on. We did education, where Nick, works in the field for over 20 years, the media and news media and television media, where I've worked for over 15 years. But just the people that we've had on, it's been so interesting. Who was one of your favorite guests that we've had on so far, Nick? If you had to pick one from the numerous that we've had.
Yeah, first thing comes to mind for me is Naveed. Naveed was one of our first guests actually on the show. It just brings, I think the recurring trend with Naveed and all of our guests is the idea of this interesting life story, this story that from where they began to where they are appearing on our program has just been amazing. In Naveed's case, he's a published author. How to Catch a Russian Spy, had served as a double agent, has been a naval intelligence officer, had worked in the media at Fox News, where Mike, you and he were able to connect on the show about. Yeah. And all of those makes it amazing experiences, just the story he tells about all of that. Especially like we talked about, what is life like in the media, the different roles that people play and who they are sometimes when the camera goes off, and just some interesting connections that you all had around that.
You mentioned a couple of media outlets in your response. When we think the presence of Russia right now from an intelligence standpoint, what do you feel the media is getting right and perhaps getting wrong about the way we're talking about? And just judging by your laugh, there's an opportunity to elaborate here. But yeah, what's the media getting right and wrong as it relates to Russia?
So the thing that I want Americans to understand is that for Russia, the Cold War never ended. When I was active 2005, 2009, the Russian GRU intelligence officer, a legit intelligence officer, captain in the Russian Navy, was part of the GRU. He had a cover here working at the UN. He viewed himself as being behind enemy lines, and he wasn't wrong, right? Like, we surveilled him. This is not a U.S. person, so we don't have to worry about all the. This is a diplomat. There's a lot of things that could be done, but they're right, and that is something that I think Americans don't understand, is the perception of how Russia looks at us. They look at us as their main enemy. We are the blocker for their success. And when you understand that, then you realize that, I fully believe that there's a connection between Russia and Trump, or Trump and Russia, I should say. But I think it also, to some degree, doesn't mean that a Democrat president, is going to be at any less risk. That because Biden is in the is going to be in the White House, that the threat to Russia diminishes. Russia's threat is consistent. It's constant. It's based on their motivation, their intent, and their capability. And frankly, as of 2016, what have we done to dissuade them from doing anything? What have we done to reduce their capability? What have we done to show that they can't be successful? Nothing. So they're just as dangerous. And in fact, I think that the media has, one of the things that really frustrated me is they treated this whole Russian election interference as if it was a legal case, as if we're going to bring these GRU officers and perp walk them and that we arrest them. And as a result, that's the end of Russia. No, these are military officers. They're doing their duty. If they're gone, they're replaced. The intent and the capability stays the same. So we've got to start seeing Russia as a threat. We've got to, frankly, we talk about defenses here. We've got to go on the offense. We've got to a lot of the intelligence officers I speak to, intelligence professionals I speak to, they're really pissed that we're not doing the same active measures back in Moscow that they're doing here. Like, why the hell are we messing with them a little bit? And, that's a frustration. That's all got to change. So Russia remains an extraordinarily dangerous threat. They remain extraordinarily motivated and committed to, continue on causing us harm. And, we should be concerned about that. It should not, our guard should not come down the minute Trump leaves the White House.
Yeah, and Naveed was really great. It was fun for him and I to kind of talk about our experiences working in the media. For me, there's so many good ones, right? Reggie Love, we invited him on the show. Former Obama aide, worked under the Obama campaign, then transitioned into the White House when Obama won in 2008. But before that, Reggie was a two-sport athlete at Duke, and he played football, basketball. Here's a guy catching college touchdowns and then playing for a national title under Coach K, one of the legendary college basketball coaches. And then he transitions into like a little known campaign of a senator from Illinois, junior senator, no chance that this guy's going to win. Hillary Clinton was the favorite. So all of that, right? Playing sports, and I'm glossing over that he had tryouts in the NFL, for Bill Parcells with the Packers. I mean, what an interesting story. A guy playing at one of the premier collegiate institutions for sports, at least basketball, in Duke, trying out for NFL teams because of his size and athleticism, right? On a different side of the ball too. He played receiver, tight end at Duke, and here he is trying out for linebacker, with the Cowboys and the Packers. And then he goes into politics and he becomes the right-hand man to the 44th president of the United States. I just thought, and then he writes a book about it all, which was really an interesting read on the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, you talk about interesting people, just a combination of all of that in sports and politics. Reggie, for me, was a really interesting guest to talk to.
Something I always like to ask any guest on the show, in these varied fields is, as a person who's been on the inside, what's a misconception everyone, like Mike and myself, anyone on the outside that hears a story like yours, what do people totally get wrong about working on a campaign and being a part of a journey like that, working for Senator Obama, then on route to the White House?
I mean, well, look, I'd say, Barack Obama now, it's like promised land, becoming 30 million books sold, president of the United States. I think a lot of people, believed it to be, a lot more sexy than what it actually is. And I kind of say that, working on a campaign for a guy who's a first term, 2-year United States junior senator from Illinois, it's not, he's no Beatle, he's no Michael Jordan. And so it is a little bit of a grind. And now I would say that I loved every minute of it, even the parts that were grind, because, working on a campaign really kind of gave me the feeling of what it felt like to play on a team. Now a little bit harder because, during the normal season, you've got a game every week or even a couple games a week, and you have a chance to go out and compete and to look at the tape and see how you did, and to get that gratification of like getting a win. A campaign almost feels like an Olympic athlete who's like training for his or her one event that they are going to have to compete on a certain day, and it's a culmination of all that training and all that work like all at once. And I think that is like, I think that nothing creates the amount of like anxiety and adrenaline around that moment, right? Where you campaign or work for 2 years for something to know whether or not like you did it right.
Yeah, Mike, Reggie's story is amazing. Just from his time working alongside President Obama, his past to that as an athlete at Duke, playing both football and basketball. And when I think about sports, it's hard to ignore another guest that came on our show, Jason Ayer. Jason's 10-part documentary on the last championship season for the Bulls, The Last Dance, premiered on ESPN, now found on Netflix. Just an amazing storyteller, tells us that story and spend a couple of days with Jordan, obviously, doing
Right.
that interview, and shares on our program just some awesome stories about MJ, things that we didn't necessarily know behind the camera. But what really stood out in that interview with Jason also is just some really, what I call nuggets of wisdom, just some awesome, awesome things that he's learned and things he imparted to us, things that definitely resonate with why we started this show and why he supported the show by coming on, and things that hopefully for listeners, they can take into their own professional practice, because I think Jason's examples, Jason's lessons really just stood out to me.
Jason, we've touched a bunch on the different sports docs that you have done that have been so iconic. Is it ever lost on you when you're filming these documentaries that, I can't mess this up? Is that ever that feeling of, I could fail at this?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's what trumps the, not to
invoke.
It's what silences that voice in your head that can be starstruck in front of a person like Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan or Barack Obama, is the urgency of, we only get one shot at this. I have to do this right. And the urgency, the fear of failure supersedes the thrill of actually meeting these people and being in front of them. Not that it's not a thrill, but yeah, there's not an interview that I do where I don't have, fleeting moments, and sometimes, long lingering moments of, all right, don't screw this up. This has to go well. With Jordan, we interviewed him 3 times for The Last Dance. And the first time we interviewed him, I had no idea if he was going to leave a half hour. I had, 6 or 7 pages of questions, and that's normally an hour a page. I didn't know how long he was planning on going. I knew what I needed to get, but I had no idea if I should just jump to the end of this thing and get the most important stuff. So yeah, there always will be. If there's not that danger and you're not out of your comfort zone, then why do it?
Yeah, Jason was fantastic, and obviously I have a relationship with him, having worked with him at HBO. It's great to see him and some of the other directors, editors that have come out of the HBO family. Ezra Edelman, I mentioned, that did the OJ documentary, and Gabe Spitzer is over at Netflix and did the John Daly 30 for 30. It's just so much talent that has come out of there. So really proud of Jason for everything he has accomplished. And some of these documentaries are so iconic. For me, one guest that I really loved talking to was Sabrina Rodriguez. She's a politics writer at Politico. And it's really the story of today's journalists, and we did an episode about her in the female journalist sense, but really it's about journalism in general, right? Like it's probably under attack as perceived by a lot of people out there, because there's the term fake news, right? And this is your fact, this is my fact, when actually this is a fact, and people's opinions are starting to bleed into fact giving. And now we've seen the rise of alternative media, and now sources are not trusted anymore. And it's good to see a reporter, who's a little bit younger but seasoned and has covered, an administration, and she's really out there reporting the facts of the day and trying to she mentioned it in the episode. My job is not to convince you. My job is to give you all of the factual information, right? Because I told people in the media episode, you gotta you got to verify everything. You got to make sure that, that this is trusted before you come to a conclusion. She's doing the same thing in that vein. And it's really cool to see somebody with such a level head on her shoulders, and really working hard in this industry, which is right now, unfortunately, over the last 4 years, has really been scrutinized. What do you make of the alternative media world and all these different options available to people?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly terrifying. And what's terrifying to me is that, like, for example, if I was a recently arrived immigrant in the United States, or I was someone that was just starting to get involved in the political process and was curious and, was going to become a citizen, was going to get to vote, or I was like really young and if I was 17 years old and I'm about to turn 18 and I'm going to get to vote and I'm starting to pay attention to all of this, like, I think it's hard. I think it's hard to gauge what you need to be following. And I mean, we know historically that people tend to, when they turn 18, follow what their parents, political party was, at least, in the immediate. And we know that, immigrant communities are influenced by what, the rest of the people that got there before them are doing. We've seen it with Cubans, for example, that, they continue to vote, by and large Republican. And even when that kind of shifted, it's kind of got swung back again to, mostly Cubans are voting Republican. And we're seeing it with Venezuelans, and we're seeing it with Colombians, and we're seeing it across the board of, people kind of like immigrant communities flowing in one way. And I think that, I could go 100 ways with this answer because there's so much to it, honestly, guys. But I just think that it's hard. It's hard to gauge who is a reliable source if you're just getting involved in this. Like, I am a journalist, and sometimes I'm like, is that person a journalist or are they a commentator? And I find myself having to say that to people, like, again, with my grandmother that watches CNN, like, I think she's very, like, well educated on what news is and news judgment and stuff, but she'll still find herself telling me, like, oh yeah, that journalist Van Jones. And I'm like, Van Jones isn't a journalist. Like, that's not, but because she sees him on CNN all the time and he's on these programs, she's just made this assumption that he is a journalist. And I think, that is a tough part of this, and that you could find someone that has the same opinion as you anywhere. Like, you could find a podcast that has people parroting what you're already thinking, and to gauge if a person that you trust or a person that you like is giving you wrong information is tough.
Sabrina was awesome. One of my favorite parts of that interview was, we pivoted briefly to talk about education, and we talked about, as a writer, what is the effect of your classroom experience? What are you learning as a writer at the earliest part of your craft, in elementary school, middle school, and the like? And what lessons stay with you? What lessons do you kind of have to unlearn as you go out into the field? And I thought the way she spoke to that just spoke to any aspiring writer, what's important to be aware of as we think of these different structures and this practice that we call writing. So I thought, from a technical standpoint, it was just awesome to hear her talk about it. And Mike, to your point, I think being a woman in the media comes with that some additional challenges that men don't face. And I thought Sabrina really hit the nail on the head, talking about just being as a Latina. What's different in the spaces that she's in when she is in a mostly male-dominated field?
Yeah, no, Sabrina was great. And we also had, we talk about all the topics and the different guests that we've had on. And one topic that I didn't really know much about was audiobooks. We had Erin Mallon on, who's a writer. She was a playwright. Written plays are featured off Broadway. She has a new book out, but she's a narrator and voiceover. And you mentioned on the episode that we had with her about how you used to listen to audiobooks, on your commute. And I just don't know much about the audio book space and narration. And I thought Erin was great to really give insight into that, because it is a booming industry. Audible, is growing every year with the volume of inventory that they have. And it was just great to learn from somebody in a different field that, it's one of those things, you're doing the show and you're trying to learn about these guests, then you're hearing it from them and it's really starting to sink in as to what they do. It was pretty cool to talk with Erin.
On the subject of advice for people getting into the field, last couple episodes we've had guests have spoken about just general advice that's helped them along the way, whether talking to people who are looking to enter their field or just people in the professional world. What are some other pieces of advice you'd offer to just people who are about to enter any space in the professional sphere?
Well, I'll talk about audiobook narration because it's funny. If I'll go to a party or something and I'll tell people I'm a writer, they'll be interested, but only to a certain degree. I say I'm an audiobook narrator and they're like, wow, that's cool. And that's always the thing that they want to talk about, which I find interesting. Something that happens a lot with voice work is usually what someone will say is, oh, I've been told I have a great voice and I should get into that. And I never want to discourage anyone because I'm not saying that's saying like it's rocket science, or I'm not saying that, but having a pleasant voice is a prerequisite. It's like a dancer putting on their shoes. So I have nice tap shoes is basically what you were saying when you say I have a nice voice. Then you got to learn what to do with it. So great, you have a nice voice. So what I would say is perfect. Now you have to take classes. You have to be a solid actor. You've got to be believable. You have to be able to play a range of characters. You have to have strong dialect and accent work. Play a gender that's different than yours in a believable, not poking fun at way, and these are all tangible things that you can figure out, but it takes training.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. Again, that trend for us is people with interesting jobs, actually. And Erin brings that perspective as a writer, but on so many different levels. And what she also did in her show is she talked about the idea of performance. And she connected it as an audiobook narrator. She gave a great example of what from the stage does she bring into her abilities as a narrator. So her just telling that story was really helpful for us. It gave some insights to anyone who has any even thought about entering audio narration, working at organizations like Audible, but also just the value of all of her experience from the stage to where she is now. And also the reality of monetization. What does it mean to have these different gigs where something is just your bread and butter? This is what pays the bills, and then the space to have the opportunity to take on other projects because you have the financial security. Erin connected all those dots and told a really awesome story in the process.
Yeah, no, and it's a great segue to our last guest of the year, because you talk about story writing and telling. And Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, we were fortunate enough to have him on the program, and his new book is out, a long time coming, A Reckoning with Race in America. I mean, here's a guy who's published so many different books. He's been on the New York Times bestseller list for years. He's a professor of sociology at Georgetown, now African American Studies at Vanderbilt. And just the depth of knowledge that he brings about race relations in America. I'm wondering, like, how difficult is it to write books on this subject matter? Even your last book, The Tears We Cannot Stop, that directly and indirectly have affected you.
Yeah, no, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate the style and intelligence with which both of you conduct yourselves and this tremendous podcast. Look, it is extremely difficult because it's not just an intellectual and abstract kind of thing. It's an existential and personal one. Black people dying, people of color being victimized by white supremacy, by police brutality, constantly, repeatedly, without, it appears, much relief. So even though I felt compelled to communicate the horrors and traumas to which Black people and other people of color are subject, I wanted to do so by writing letters to these, martyrs as opposed to about them, because I didn't want to further objectify them, cash in on their names for dollars. I wanted to really communicate the sense of hurt and pain that people of color endure when recognizing that the state imprimatur of a badge and a gun, a taser and a baton in the service of the official rules and the official governance of the government is used to undermine and hurt people of color, in this case specifically Black people, but Latinx, Indigenous, Arab people, across the board. And so I wanted to talk about that, and it is painful.
Yeah. In a tradition that we've seen from James Baldwin, not too long ago with Maya Angelou, to recently with Ta-Nehisi Coates, the ability to write letters as a personal way of sharing stories. And Dr. Dyson does that by writing letters to African Americans who've been murdered by the police. And in doing so, just really opened up to us about what is the impact on these tragedies in the Black community, and moving ahead with a new presidential administration. What does 2021 look like? Shedding some light about what his hopes are and what the realities are right now.
Right. That's a great segue, Nick, because 2021 is right around the corner. Obviously, we're taping this, right around the Christmas, New Year's holiday break. And in 2021, we've got some great topics and guests lined up for 2021. It's going to be a really exciting 2021. Nick, what are you looking forward to most for this program and also, personally?
I think for the program, and the program to me connects personally. Mike, we've been friends for years, so I'm very lucky in the sense that now weekly, we have an appointment on our calendar. You and I get a chance to just connect as people, as friends, and then we get a chance to do that with a guest. So for me, I think of where the show goes is to continue to tell the stories of interesting people. One of my hopes for anyone who is watching or listening to this show, and again, we're available everywhere, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, just the ability to hear the stories of people that you may not have heard of before, or maybe you have, but you haven't heard the story of how they got to where they are now. And being able to see people tell that life trajectory, and also one thing I know I want to do is continue to ask people to share some pieces of wisdom, things that we can all be able to take into our lives and think about as we grow as professionals, as we grow as parents, as we grow as men and women, as contributors to society, things that we can bring into our own lives, based on the accomplishments and the stories of the people that come onto our program.
Yeah, no, it's well said. And that's really what the goal of this show is. And we're excited to bring it to you guys. We hope everybody has a safe and happy holiday season. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And I am Grateful and Nick Zaveri.
You can subscribe to the show, tell your friends about us, give us a follow if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button wherever podcasts are available. We thank you so much, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in 2021.